Good afternoon, everyone. I am Stephanie Roper, the marketing assistant here at Achem Plant Limited. Thank you for joining another one of Achem's virtual farmers session. This is the first part of a two-part series on onion crop care. Our presenter today is Mr. Jonoy Johnson. He is our product development agronomist for Southeast region. At the end of this presentation, we will take all your questions, and there will also be a prize at the end of the presentation. So stay tuned and you may just be the winner of that prize. Go ahead, Jonoy.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another AgChem Live. I'm Janai Johnson, Product Development Agronomist for the Southeast region. And she mentioned that this is a two-part series, right? So the first part, as you can see on the screen, we're focusing on land preparation. And you may wonder why the emphasis on land preparation. All right, land preparation right now is basically one of the key factors that will influence your productivity, especially for onions. So the approach is basically to give each and every one who is interested in doing onion production, or if you're interested in doing other crops, this presentation will help you understand what is needed to basically have a good land prep before planting. Right? So what I'll do, I'll just carry through the different things that are needed and let you understand how you can better prepare your land. Right? All right. So things that we're going to focus on in this presentation. So what I've designed is basically a target yield for the year 2020 to 2021 cropping season. So that's going to be one first slide. Importance of proper land preparation. The next thing, site selection, followed by land clearing, then plowing, harrowing, rotivation and bed shaping, drain construction, steel bed technique, and pre-emergent application. All right, so let's begin. All right, so the target yield for 2020 to 2021 cropping season, I'm looking at achieving about 45,000 pounds of onion for the acre, right? And the national average that we're getting is about an average of 18 to 20,000 pounds. So from that 45,000 pounds, you see that I'm trying to double that average. And you may say, Janai, can we do it? I know it can be done. We have seen it done before. We have several testimonials of farmers who have done it. On the picture, you can see Mr. Granville Francis and his wife basically happily posing for with their harvest. So it is a target that can be reached. And I love for basically most of the farmers that are using the program to achieve this harvest. Right? So we're coming out on top. All right. So, but in order to achieve this harvest, we have to know the things to do, right? So let us basically go into those things. All right. First thing, seek expertise advice. And many times farmers basically go to different presentations and hear the wonderful cash or monetary values they can gain from entering production for a certain crop, right? But what I'll tell farmers, seek expertise advice. Because in anything, before you go into it, you want to have a knowledge of what are the plus and the minuses. So expertise advice is always good. Obtain a cost benefit analysis. And this will basically give a breakdown of the costs in terms of land preparation, pesticides, fertilizers, and the list goes on. So that will give you a breakdown per acre of what you need, how much money you're looking to spend, and basically what you expect to get out of that. Because too many times farmers enter into crop production and don't have an understanding of how much money they will spend. So they either underspend or overspend. And believe me, in farming, you can quickly overspend and end up with low productivity. All right, next thing, proper land preparation, which is, as I always tell farmers, is one of the key things, because most of the times we're growing in the soil. So if the soil is not an hospitable host for the plant, then the yield will basically be low, right? So we're looking at getting proper land preparation. Seed selection, which is key. So knowing which seed is basically right for the season. So with onion production, we have a fall and a spring season. So knowing which seed is optimal for your production. All right. And one of the key points, the use of AgChem's onion crop care program. This is a program that has been tried and proven, as I said many times. There is increase in success right now, and we look for greater success for the future. So the use of AgChem program is key in achieving this goal. Record keeping, which I can basically attest that the rather colleagues stress this. So record keeping is ideal. Knowing what you spend, knowing what you purchase, how much you purchase, what's your yield like, this is ideal for basically maintaining the business of agriculture. And then we'll go to proper harvesting, handling, and storage. So after all that work done, you basically want to secure your harvest, right? So the proper harvesting and handling and storage is basically key in you having a successful crop. Because many times I've seen where farmers have basically done all that is right for when the last step to basically to sell, they have nothing much because the handling and storage wasn't done properly. So that is one more key step. And then your market distribution. So you basically should have in mind which market you are targeting before you enter your crop production. And that will basically give you an idea of your pricing per pound or per kg, right? So understanding which market you're going to target is an key thing. All right, let's move on. All right, so we're going to importance of proper land preparation. And one of the first things we see here is the improved soil texture, right? And for many persons who basically cultivate on high clay soil, they would understand the importance of proper land preparation. Because what you want to do is basically refine your soil texture that the plant is able to anchor better in the plant, better uptake of nutrients. So improving the soil texture is very key. For persons who are basically on a sandy soil, this is also very relevant because with a sandy base, you're seeing quick drainage, loose soil. So improving soil texture is a key component. All right. The next factor is that create a balanced air to water ratio. And what I mean is that for a healthy soil, you want almost a halfway balance between water and air spaces, right? And this basically allows for the root to properly uptake nutrients. So when you have a good air to water ratio, you have easier uptake of nutrients, quicker spread of your rooting, and basically you don't have your rooting system being suffocated. And this goes especially with wet areas. So when the soil is completely wet, you basically have your plants quickly yellowing. And because the air to water ratio is low, you don't have that proper uptake, especially in nitrogen, right? And even sulfur working in conjunction with the nitrogen to have that quick growth. Also, recycling of plant nutrients. A lot of times when we're doing plowing operations, you see where the tractor operator basically turns that growing vegetation into the soil. So this helps to recycle your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium into your soil medium, right? To basically improve your nutrient component, which most farmers are looking for, especially for our organic growers or growers who are trying to minimize on synthetic fertilizer. This is a key process. So recycling the plant nutrients is vital. and then a weed control. And this, I may say, and a lot of persons seeing that and saying, yes, weed control, that it's one of the main issues that is basically hampering crop or great production, to say, for many farmers. And I can attest for lower and catching areas where weed is a main factor. So reducing your weed population is a next benefit from for proper land preparation. All right. Next aspect, reduce pest and disease. And you may say, what do you mean, January? We prepare the land. We're not growing crops. All right. See those growing weeds? Basically, they are hosts for a lot of pests and disease. So when you have weeds constantly growing, you're basically giving the pests and disease a source of nutrients, right? So when you turn over that weed in the soil, you will reduce that source of nutrients, and then eventually minimizing the pest and disease population. And for disease, yeah, as I said, a lot of plants are hosts, are hosts. So you may have let me see now. For example, white top host to a lot of aphids, right? Red aphids. So mini the proper land preparation help you to reduce your pest and disease problem for the future. All right. And if you see, and below the slide, you're seeing where I mentioned that land preparation is usually done 2 to 3 months prior to planting. And for onion, this is basically very essential. And you may say, John, that's basically a quarter of the year. All right. With to get excellent onions, the weed population basically has to be minimal. So you can prepare your land for, for about 3 weeks and expect to get the performance a person that has been preparing their land 2 to 3 months before, right? But they're basically taking the necessary steps to minimize that weed seed bank for healthier production. All right. So let us basically break down these components. All right. So before we even say go into land preparation, we have to basically select our site. And this is another key process, because many times we see where farmers just decide that, all right, somebody is leasing me a land or I have a piece of land, let's cultivate the crop. For onion production, availability of water, quality of water is crucial. Terrain is an X factor. Soil texture again, available lighting, drainage, which I'll speak later on in the presentation, and then neighboring fields. So let me break down each of these basically essential factors that you need to consider. So availability and quality of water, right? Onion needs a suitable amount or adequate amount of water, especially in the early stage. So when I mean early stage, we're talking about direct seeding, or if you're transplanting, the seeds need adequate water to successfully germinate, right? So if you have access to hydrants, rivers, canal, water catchment, you have to ensure that that is sufficient to carry your onion crop. Despite you may get periods of rainfall, you have to calculate that the volume of water that you have access to is sufficient to carry a crop. And I know farmers will say, but I can't calculate what NIC has or may or can deliver, right? For circumstances like that, you can put in systems where you can store water, right? You may not store it for the entire crop, but put in backup systems that will help you through this period. And as regards to quality, because a lot of persons don't focus on that. They just know that they're storing water, but they don't have an idea of the quality of the water, which can be a serious factor, especially in the plant's health. So check the quality of the water. Either you want to try a government body, or a lot of labs basically have research of equipments that can basically test the quality of water. So you're checking for fungal pathogen or bacterial pathogens, right? And and this is basically, uh, as I said, is a vital process that will basically help you to understand, because you may be supplying a crop with sufficient water, but you cannot see the fungal pathogens that may persist or live in that water that will cause you a greater extent of stress, right? Right. So that's the next key. pH and salinity, very essential, because different nutrients are basically taken up at different pH levels. And we know, well, some of us know that the pH range from about 0 to 14, where you have 0 to 6.9 being acidic, and then 7 being neutral, and from 7.1 upwards, 14 is basically alkaline. So different nutrients are taken up at different pH levels, and this is very essential for your, especially your onion crops, which have basically shallow roots. So you need your pH around that area to be ideal for the proper uptake of your nutrients. And for this, you can basically buy reasonable pH monitors that you can get on any of the internet mediums. Right? All right. And salinity. This is one the thing that has been very important to me, especially when it comes to water testing. A lot of times, especially if you're getting water from the government bodies, I don't think we as farmers basically test the water to test the salinity, right? And this is very important, especially if you're close to a flood-prone area or area basically close to the sea, which you can have intrusion, saltwater intrusion. And as I can tell you, you can have the best of land, but once your water is too saline, you will have poor production. And farmers who experience this can tell you that it's indeed factual, right? All right, so let's move on again. Uh, terrain, so the terrain. So in selecting your land, you have to know whether you're dealing with a hillside setup, a flat setup, or a slope. And the reason why I say this is that this will influence your irrigation design. So if your irrigation design can't meet your land setup, then you have an issue in properly watering your crop, right? So determine or look whether your land is basically a hillside setup, a flat setup, or a slope. Because in addition to irrigation design, it will also influence how you prepare your land, be it manually or mechanically. For persons who are on steep hillside, they can't use machineries like those on a flat. So you have to decide what access you have to labor or machinery to basically cultivate the crop. All right. Our next factor, it influences your planting beds. So how you orientate your beds. On the flat, it's not a main factor, but once you basically have slope, gently slope to a steep slope, positioning of your bed is very crucial. Because many times I see where farmers or tractor operators construct beds that are running down the slope. And this will basically lead to washing of your soil, washing your nutrients. So farmers, be aware of that. Always try to position your beds along the slope, especially if you're doing cultivation on a steep land. So basically help to preserve your nutrients. So take a walk of the land and see in what direction it's sloped or if it's basically a flat area. All right. As I mentioned earlier, it will affect your irrigation setup. So a lot of times persons who are on the steep slope usually draw for sprinkler irrigation, which is better for them because you may not have access to funding to install a intricate drip irrigation system. So a sprinkler approach is usually the easiest solution. And for those on the flat, the drip system is basically still the best because onion or for most plants prefer to have water being sent to the rooting system instead of the foliage, right? And that would basically minimize any bacterial or fungal pathogens affecting your plant. So understanding your terrain is our next crucial aspect. All right. Soil texture and soil type. And being a Caribbean island or being an island basically made up of different soil types. This is an essential factor, right? Because a lot of time we can't basically have a standard to say a farmer in St. Thomas should basically operate similar to a farmer in Clarendon or St. Catherine because the soil type vary gradually. Even on farms, I see where the soil type vary. So understanding your soil texture, your soil type is very essential. Because for example, as I said, the first point here, porosity. A lot of time farmers basically don't even understand what this is mean. And this is what it says, a measure of the material's ability to hold the fluid. So on a clay soil, it is basically able to hold water much more than a sandy soil. So a clay soil will have a greater porosity than a sandy soil. But when we talk about permeability, it's basically the measure of the ease of the fluid to flow through the structure, right? So a sandy soil will be more porous than a clay soil. And in areas of in Yalas, St. Thomas, we have mostly sandy soils. So those soils basically are losing water or have quicker drainage more than areas in Clarendon, St. Catherine, and parts of West, right? So you have to understand your soil texture. And you a lot of time farmers may just work with a set rule. So they probably go to a training and say, all right, I'm gonna set up or construct my irrigation system based on what I've seen. That won't work. Because if you're on a sandy soil and you work with an irrigation system that a farmer who is on a clay use, you'll basically get completely different results and probably lower productivity. All right. Next factor, nutrient retention. And based on the water holding capacity, the soils differ when it comes to nutrient retention. So a clay soil will basically have more cation and anion. And for persons who are more scientific, they'll understand. But what I'm basically saying is that a clay soil will hold more nutrients than a sandy soil, right? Because the particles or elements, especially nitrogen, binds greater to clay soils compared to the sandy soil. So for persons who are on the clay, they basically have some amount of reserve in their soil to begin with compared to those on the sand. So that's an X factor. And with understanding that, you'll know how to modify your soil. So farmers who operate on sandy soil would have to basically incorporate manure, right? Broken down manure that will add to their other absorption of nutrients, right? And better water retention. All right. So it takes and next key thing, since we're going through this constant rainy period, we see that soil texture influence how your water run off or how your water is held. So we see in St. Catherine, Clarendon, where basically a lot of farms are being flooded. Because once those soil types reach a capacity where they can't hold any more water, they have a constant runoff. So the soil won't absorb any more water than it can manage. So you have a constant runoff. For the sandy soil, you have that quick drainage until you reach a high saturation point where the soil cannot drain anymore and you have washing of your top soil. So you get greater washing with the sandy soil. All right, let's move to the next one. All right, as you can see, basically, we see in the permeability. So we see where the sand particles or the sandy soil is basically releasing the same amount of water that is basically taken up. So you see rapid movement of water, while the sandy loam, you see moderate, and for the clay, it's very slow. So that basically explains the permeability of your soil. And with further slides, we'll basically see what I'm talking about. All right. And this is the diagram. I know it looks a bit intricate based on what you're seeing. You're seeing that the saturation or the field capacity of the sandy soil is basically wider compared to the loam and clay. So for the silty clay loam soil, you basically hold in more water that is basically available to the plants. And this is basically in the light brown area, right? While the excess gravitational water for the sandy soil is much greater. So that is water that the plant won't access, that will basically running off your land. So that gravitational water is much greater for the sandy soil, right? And then now for the available water to the plant, for the clay, it's much greater compared to the sandy soil, as I said before. And then now unavailable water, which the plant can access, that will basically create a higher water reserve in the soil. And sometimes that water moves up when you have drier conditions, right? And to keep the soil moist. All right, adequate lighting. And this, I think, is an important point for many crops. Because we see it in Irish potato, we see it in onion and pepper production. Persons not giving the crop or selecting areas that have adequate lighting. So although you have onions variety that does well in the fall, which has lower day length, the crop still needs proper lighting. As you can see in the picture over to the left, that onion field, properly lit. So we don't have any trees blocking out the sunlight, basically don't have any internal shading, right? Sun is basically penetrating that crop. And we know the benefits of sunlight, which is important in photosynthesis, protein building, a range of process for the crop. So adequate sunlight is very crucial. All right. And I say avoid planting in areas that has large trees. Either the trees are running along the crop or within planting area. And what that does is that the root zone that those large trees have will basically span about 10 to 20 feet. So within that area from the trunk, 10 to 20 feet from the trunk, you have that plant taking up all that water and that nutrient. So if you plant your onion crop right at the side of those rooting, you're basically losing nutrients and losing available water. So if it's that you can avoid that area or try to basically select a next site, I tell you to do that. It doesn't make sense planting near large trees. And onion, the process of bulbing is basically very dependent on lighting. Because if you were to grow this crop at this time, but under a shaded structure, it may not bulb, it just remain leaf, which a lot of persons may think you're growing onions. So onions are heavily dependent on lighting and daylight, right? So choose the area that is adequately lit. And for persons who are basically on the hillside or farm along a hillside, choose areas that the sun will rise on the crop first. So getting that morning sunlight, choose that area for the cultivation. You still want some amount of evening light, but if you don't have sufficient, just choose an area that will get adequate early morning sunlight, right? All right, still on site selection. And farmers don't get bored, basically crucial information here. All right, neighboring fields. And what I mean, many times I've seen areas where the farmers are basically gearing up for the onion season, but beside them, a farmer is still cultivating crops like onion, scallion, right? And we all know that onion and scallion are basically within the same family. So they share the same pest and disease. So once you have any outbreak, any pest or disease in that scallion field, it's going to pass over to the onion field. So if you have wind blowing or water basically spreading the disease, you have a higher possibility of basically having infectious breakout. So choose areas that don't have crops of the same family, right? Or if you can basically cultivate a crop out of those seasons that the neighboring farmers would usually cultivate their scallion or garlic or whatever crop, choose those timings, you can have better performance in your crop. And weed species, yeah, this doesn't really fall under neighboring crops, but weed species are important. As we all know that the nut grass, which are a lot of persons call it scallion grass, is basically a serious factor in onion cultivation. But there are a lot of persons who are giving out contracts who said that if you have scallion grass in your field, you won't get a contract. So if you can avoid areas that have a lot of nut grass growth, basically I try to avoid. I tell you to avoid it. But on Alchem is basically geared with products that can control the nut grass. And I'll just quickly mention too, we have the glyphosate with benzene combination. So once you get moisture applied to that area that you have the nut grass, then you apply the combination of glyphosate and benzene to basically reduce the nut grass population, right? But bear in mind to try to avoid those areas. All right. Lastly, the history surrounding the location. Since recent rains, many farmers have basically called to tell me that they are surprised that areas of their farm are basically waterways. So if they had done checks on that property to know that when they get torrential rainfall, certain areas of your farm will basically be prone to heavy volumes of water, they would avoid planting in those areas, right? So understand or identify locality, the rivers, lakes, areas that will basically be known for flooding, right? All right. For persons who are on the hillside, you have areas that are basically prone to wildfires. So time your production to avoid those drier seasons that you may have wildfire breaking up. Because even if the fire doesn't directly affect you, the heat from the fire may cause serious burning to your crops. So you want to basically understand whether in the past you had any issues with wildfire. All right. Occurrence of landslides, and this is very crucial again for persons cultivating on the hillsides, because you can easily lose an acre of your property from one landslide. So find areas that are not prone to land slippages. All right. And the next major factor is predatory larceny. Uh, this may be a deterrent, but based on understanding the history, farmers can put in the necessary devices or tools to minimize predatory larceny. So basically having information from farmers who are in the locality, or what's the rate of theft in the area, because you may lose irrigation material and that can cost you the whole crop. You may have close to harvest, you're losing the whole crop before you harvest. So understand the history of predatory is an key thing. And the cropping history. So whether person that plant onions there before, what was the success, what was the failures. So that will basically guide you into designing a proper program to have a successful crop. All right, let us move on to another key component. All right, so basically leaving site selection and entering land clearing. So select the area that you're working with and moving on to land clearing. And this may not be for all farmers, because some persons may have been cultivating on the areas before. But for those who are fresh and basically have a fresh piece of land that they want to know what to do, basically go into land clearing. All right. So we're going to focus on removal of large trees, shrubs, and weed control practices. All right. Let's move on. So you can see here on the slide, I'm not saying to not use a bulldozer, but what I'm focusing on is do not remove your topsoil. Too many times I'm seeing farmers basically contracting large machine operators to come in to prepare the land. But what I see happening is that large chunks of the topsoil is taken away after you have those bulldozers coming in, right? So if you can find an operator that can successfully navigate by removing the trees and not troubling your topsoil. As we know, for onion, we're looking at we're operating within the first 6 inches of the soil. And what I mean is that the root zone settles around that area. So if you remove those 6 inches, that's 6 inches, it basically minimizing your potential nutrient availability, right? So do not remove your topsoil. So use basically equipment that can remove the trees, remove the stumps without affecting your topsoil. And if in case you're not able to access machineries, for those who are on the slopes, you can basically a lot of times when you get manual labor, they'll cut the stumps and leave those stumps in the soil. If you're going to consider using a tractor to prepare land, those stumps are a no-no. So what I tell farmers to do, one of the most efficient way is basically to bore a hole within the center of the stump and try to light a fire within that hole, and that will gradually burn out that stump and allow the farmer or allow the labor to easily take it out. And as I said, I, I'm encouraging farmers to do it responsibly. So monitor the area that you're going to light the fire. So you're not lighting the fire around the stump, you're lighting it inside the stump. And that will easily break down that woody area and you can easily remove that stump. Right? Because for a lot of the government tractor operators, they will not plow your land if they're seeing a lot of stumps. So I'd advise you to get those out. All right. Land clearing. And this is for persons who are basically recultivating the area or want to check if there's any structural problems with their land. All right. So what I mean by recultivation, so a lot of times you basically had cultivated a crop the previous year, right? So you have your irrigation material lying on the beds. In order to access them, you'll basically need to remove that vegetation, right? Because it will be very difficult to remove irrigation while you have fresh vegetation covering the bed and covering the land. So what's the best approach? Best approach is basically the use of herbicides, be it systemic or contact herbicides. And those that we have for systemic herbicides, I'll mention in the next slide. So we have the glyphos max, we have the glyphos AG, right? We have 2,4-D, we have Diran. And for contact, we have the paraquat, scorcher, or the carister. Right? But in the use of herbicides, we have to factor in the pH, the water. And a lot of times I see persons using herbicides and complaining that they're not getting efficient results from herbicide, which the pH is usually a key factor. So if you check your pH of your water, you find out that it's about 7.8 or 8 generally, right? But a lot of herbicides, as you can see right here, glyphosate active, need a pH of 3.5. So in order to bring that pH from 8 to 3.5, you'd have to add some source a pH reducer. And that would usually be, for me, an easier source that has double benefits is sulfate of ammonia. And we have recently brought in our amosulfan, which is a sulfate of ammonia base, 20% nitrogen and 24% sulfur. And what this does, all right, let me break it down. So if you're mixing a drum of herbicide, what I mean by a drum, 45 to 50 gallon of water, you basically use about 5 to 6 pounds of sulfate of ammonia to that drum. And you dissolve that those granules, and then you add the recommended rate of your glyphos max, there, and etc. Right? So that will basically reduce your pH for the water and also kind of trick the weeds that they're getting a source of nutrients and taking the herbicide much faster to get an effective control. And as you can see in the pictures in the slide, so this is 1 week after the application with the sulfate of ammonia at the ideal pH and glyphosate. So you're getting good control there. All right. So, but the thing you have to basically consider is the type of weed species, which I'm gonna touch on shortly. All right, here we go. So, weed species. A lot of times we're used to our glyphosate active. So we're talking about the glyphosate max or glyphosate AG. But we realize that even though we have used it at the right pH, with an adjuvant, we're still not getting control of certain weeds, which is basically obvious to us as manufacturers and formulators. The glyphosate active won't control all your weed species. So, for example, your vines and your creepers, you may see scorching of the leaf, but you may not get complete control, right? You'll get control of your herbaceous weeds like your wild callaloo, basically your white top, and then you get general control of your grasses. So what we recommend when you have a lot of creepers in your land is the use of 2,4-D. And basically this is a broadleaf herbicide that will control from your coral vines. And as you can see in the pictures, a lot of persons relate to that weed as your rice and peas. So you get control of that, your quaco bush, your water grass, which farmers should know is not a true grass species, right? So you get control of those. So knowing the type of weed species present on your land is very important. And even for some of the herbaceous species, those that have a cushiony leaf may not be controlled by a glyphosate active. So basically be aware of that, right? So if you're not getting control from a glyphosate active, you can rely on your 2,4-D alternative. And ensure when you're using the 2,4-D, ensure that there are no surrounding crops in the area. Because being a broadleaf killer to basically either cause some phytotoxicity or completely kill the plants that you have growing in the area that you're already here. All right, so let us basically go through quickly with the products I had mentioned. So see on the left we have the Glyphos Max, which is basically an upgrade to the Glyphos AG. We actually place the penetrant and a surfactant in this product. So you're basically getting quicker burning. So you, unlike the Glyphos AG, where it would take probably 7 to 10 days, or you get, about 10 to 14 days. With the Glyphos Max, you're getting control within about 8 days, right? But once the pH is at the right level, you basically get controlled within 8 days. And our regular Glyphos AG, still effective product, very effective. And with this product, you can use any of our surfactant. All right. And diuretic, a thing that I do personally in any land preparation work is that try to rotate active ingredients. So like where you rotate chemicals in controlling your pest and disease, you can rotate your herbicide. So diuretic is the next good alternative. So if you have about 3 months before you're basically going to plant onion, diuretic could be a good alternative to control most of your grasses and some of your broadleaf weed species. Because weeds do build up tolerance to herbicides. So if you can rotate them, that is great. ideal. All right, for the contacts now, we have our old faithful paraquat, very effective same way. Basically, you get control within 3 days, and it's an excellent contact for quick burning, right? And then we have the upgrade to the paraquat, which is a scorcher, which we have our surfactant, and we have our sticker place in that. So it's a thicker formulation that will give even faster burning. And based on research that we have done with scorcher, even if the farmer is experiencing a slight drizzle or has just applied a slight drizzle, it's coming down, farmers still see control from the scorcher, right? And the next newly introduced product is a Carista. And I mean new, I'm talking about uh, 1.5 year now. So Carista is a contact herbicide with the active ingredient glufosinate ammonia. So this is basically marketed as a product that can be used in between your crop rows, but this is also excellent for your land clearing because if you have weeds that may not be controlled by your paraquat dichloride active, Carista will basically give you that quick contact control and cover a wider range of weed species. So you can consider the Carista as an next alternative. And a key thing that farmers usually leave out of their application is your adjuvants. Very effective with periods of continuous rainfall. I advise farmers to basically include an adjuvant. So what we have basically the widest range of adjuvants on the market right now. We have the very effective breakthrough, right? Effective in terms of penetration, spreading, and wetting. So you're getting good coverage within a short time, right? And it's a low application rate, basically 5 ml per 5 gallon, or for many person, 1 teaspoon to 5 gallons of water, right? And if you're looking a more oil-based solution, we have our exit, which is a penetrant, which you use with your systemic herbicides or insecticides, right? So being oil-based, basically you're getting quicker wetting and spreading of your solution. And this application rate is 5 ml per gallon of water. Right? All right, next one, new Flim P. Basically oil-based as well, but we really designed this for your contact herbicides. So similar to the exit, is 5 ml per gallon, which will be 1 teaspoon per 1 gallon. Right? Very effective in quick wetting. So if you get in a shower rain within 15 minutes after application, you're safe because new Flim P would basically give a quick wetting, coating of your leaf to prevent degradation by water and by chemical, by sunlight. Right? And the old faithful spreader sticker, still on the market, basically still effective, right? Only thing is just a high application rate of 10 ml per gallon, but at a cheaper cost. So let us go into the manual or the preparation activities. So the first one is plowing. And this may not relate to every farmer, but for those who it is who basically need the operation, let's just go into it. All right. And what I mean by every farmer is that persons who are on a sandy soil don't generally do plowing on their land. They mainly skip the process of plowing and go to harrowing. Right? But for persons with heavy clay soil, plowing is basically a very essential process, right? All right. So as you see, I'm seeing plowing is an agriculture implement with sharp blades, either attached to animals or a tractor for cutting and turning the soil. We're talking about basically taking a lower layer, turning it on top of the soil, allow for breaking weathering. So we're talking about weathering from either the water or sunlight, right? So you're taking that lower layer which has a lot of weed seeds, which has a lot of pests and fungi, turning up to the top and exposing that. So once a tractor operator is not doing that, then we can consider plowing. And we have the different type of plows. So right now we have the moldboard plow, which is one of the older type of plow in operation, which is usually drawn by an animal. And many hand tractors, the small hand tractor, a lot of people call it nibby, is usually has a moldboard plow attached. You have your popular disc plow, you have your subtiller, you have a chisel plow, and your rotary plow, right? So those are the different type of plows out there. So when you're basically engaging a tractor operator, ask him what type of plow he's using and to understand what type of result you may get going forward. All right. So on the screen, as I said before, I'm considering all farmers. So if you're still using animal drawn plow, I'm considering you. If you're on the flatter and using tractor operator, I'm considering you as well. So on the screen, you see 4 different scenarios where a guy left using a hand tractor plow to basically turn over his soil, right? And next, you see a next guy now with a tractor basically pulling a disc plow. So depending on your, as I said before, your terrain, you'd use different equipment. Because the guy with the hand tractor is on a gradual slope. Either you may not have access to tractors, or a tractor operator may say, your slope is too steep, I don't want to take on that operation, right? So you have different options. And then now below you see a person drawing a moldboard plow with an axe. And the animal drawn plows are still relevant in areas of Upper Clarendon and areas of Kentish in St. Catherine. These are still done. So farmers out there who are not aware, these operations are still carried out locally. So any method you have to plow your land, advise you, once it's done properly, you can go forward with it. All right. Let us focus on the different patterns of plowing. So you have your circular plowing and you have your headland pattern, right? And the circular pattern basically refers to plowing that begins at the edge of the field and works its way in the center. So in the first diagram up top, you're seeing where the tractor begins at the edge and gradually makes its way to the center using circular pattern. Right? And this is usually done by more animal drawn plows in areas of Asia. So they mainly do the circular pattern of plowing. Right? All right. The second type is the headland. And this has basically 3 alternatives. So you can do the one-way pattern, the gathering pattern, or the casting pattern. And farmers, it's very essential that you are aware of what type of pattern is being done in your field. Understand what level of preparation you are getting. So for the one-way pattern, and what I mean by headland is basically the head of the area that is prepared. So the non-prepared area would be the headland. So for the one-way pattern, the tractor will basically go up and down one direction and making turns on the headland. And you will continue that until he reaches the end of the line, right? They're going up and down until the operation is completed at the other end of the line. While gathering is a system that basically begins in the center. And it's still a headland approach because the tractor is turning in the unprepared area of the property, right? So as I said, this system basically begins in the center of the field and works its way out to the edges. So it's a tractor operator get a measuring of the land, basically find the dead center and start his operation there. A lot of times it's not really practiced in Jamaica. For larger farms, this is basically one of the main approach they use. All right. The next approach is basically casting. No, an X pattern is basically cast where the operator starts on the edge and makes his way to the center. It's one of the more popular type operation, especially for say small tractors or persons using a disc plow. Right? This is a more popular option for those operators. And to note, before we even go into plowing, farmers always ensure that the implements or the tractor that is going to enter your property is clean. I know that's a difficulty, especially if you're not able to access or have a wide selection of operators. You may not basically get this request, but always ensure that the tractor or implement that is entering your land is properly sanitized. And what I mean about that by that is that you want to ensure that the operator basically either power wash or by through chemical means sanitize that implement, which may even bring fungal pathogen, weed species, or even nematodes. And once you have a outbreak of those things, you're basically going to encounter problem before you start your cultivation. All right. So quick recap. I said plowing is basically turning over the soil. So you're turning over large clumps of the soil to allow it to basically break down by water or sunlight. Right? But the next step, which is usually done 1 month after plowing, is harrowing. And a lot of farmers will ask me, but Johnny, when I see the tractor operator coming to my farm, I see him with this implement, right? And he says he's gonna plow and or he's gonna prepare my land. All right. For farmers, I know it's very prevalent. A lot of time tractor operators use an arrow and tell you that they're going to do plowing. That cannot be done. That is impossible, right? Because the whole point of a plow, let's say, is to turn the soil, right? The arrow is to basically refine those clumps or those large areas of soil. So you can have where operator is telling you that he will plow with an arrow. Understand that? All right. And for us in the Caribbean, a lot of time we'd see the disc plow. So we see them in the single action pattern, offset pattern, or the double action that has a wheel attached to it. But you have other type of plow like your chain, your finger tooth, your finger arrow, the chain arrow, etc. Right? But what I'll tell the farmers, do not, and this goes for farmers who are on heavy clay soil, do not let the operator basically charge you for plowing when he's using an arrow, because the arrow won't give you the same effect that a plow would do. And this is, as I said, needed for heavy soil types. All right. So to give you an understanding how the land will look after harrowing. On the right, we're seeing before harrowing, and on the right is an area that is plowed. You're seeing those large clumps. So that is what remains after the plowing operation. On the left now, we're seeing harrowing, and you will realize how refined the soil is, right? So that's how your soil is supposed to look after the harrowing process has been completed. And below, this is a local picture of of a land that has been harrowed. Right? You see that? Level and uniform separation, right? In no large clumps. That's how a land is supposed to look after you have completed harrowing. And this is a step that is, as I said before, is normally done by persons who are on the sandy soil. So they won't basically pay pay for a plow, pay for an harrow, because they don't need to basically go deep within the soil because the soil is already loose. They don't need a deep operation. You just need an operation that will break down any clumps of sand that are combination of sand and silt that basically come together that they want to loosen and allow them to carry out the other operations successfully. All right. So we move from harrowing now to bed shaping and rotivation. All right, listen now. This is one of the key steps. So plowing operation and harrowing is basically common to a lot of persons, but the bed shaping and rotivating is basically new for many persons, and especially if you're new to the operation, you're new to the cultivation of onions, the rotivation process is very essential. So let me go through the two or the three scenarios that may follow harrowing. All right. So the first scenario and the most ideal scenario, and this scenario depends on if you have access to a rotivator that has a bed shaper attached to it, right? So for the larger farmers or doing large acreages of onion, would usually have this implement. So what this implement will do is basically rotivate the soil, so breaking down the clumps or the soil particles even finer, right? While the implement to the back, and if you can look at the slide to the bottom, you're seeing the implement that is basically shaping the bed. That will be the bed shaper. So the rototiller is that larger object, while the bed shaper is attached to it. So that will be so that implement will rotate the soil and then shape it at the same time. So you're doing two processes in one. All right. The next scenario would be to rotivate the soil. So you get a operator with a rotivator, and that operator rotivate the soil that has been harrowed, so refine it, and then he will follow that with a bed shaper. So you rotivate that soil, and then probably depending on how accessible the bed shaper is, you come in a week or less and shape the beds for you. And for onion production, we're looking for flat beds. And reason being is that we usually cultivate at least 3 rows on a bed, right? It can go as upwards of 6 rows on a bed. And what I mean is that you have 6 lines of onions running along a single bed. So we're looking for wider beds, and depending on your soil type, that will affect how high your bed is, or if it is even raised, which we're going to touch later on. So the second process, let me go through. You basically rotivate the soil and then you shape a bed. And the third process now is if you find yourself in a scenario where you don't have access to a rotivator, right? But you have access to a hand tractor or a hand tiller. What usually happens in this process is that after you prepare, after you harrow your piece of land, you get someone to basically create some high beds, right? High beds. And what you follow through as a farmer or farm worker is that you use this antiller to basically refine those beds. So when you run that antiller on top of the bed, it creates flat beds and refine the soil. So so you don't have to worry if you don't have access to the rotivator. Just try to access the hand tiller, which are usually common. Just make your beds and then use a hand tiller to run on top of those beds. And depending on how much pass you make on the bed, that will gauge the width of your bed. So usually persons make 1 or 2 pass, and those beds would usually hold 2 lines, right? But depending on how wide you want the bed, you can gauge your passes. And it will work just as well as the rototiller, right? Not giving you may not be as fine, but it basically create a condition that will be ideal for the onion. So that giving you that nice 6 inches of nicely refined soil. All right. And to understand, to get a physical understanding of what I'm talking about, look at the first picture. And here is a farm in Yalas. And as I said, over to the right where I see I'm giving the description, saying that these beds are flat. And as you can see, they're basically generally flat beds, right? With the piles of stone being placed in the furrow. And that is after the operation of raking those stones, the excess stones, to basically have your bed nice and loose. And the reason for this type of bed design is that it's a sandy soil. I remember earlier I mentioned sandy soils have high permeability. So if you decide to make your bed high, what will happen is that most of your water would basically leave that upper layer and settle in your furrows, which you don't want. But that would put your onion plant under great stress. So what you aim for is basically flatter beds where you can do quick irrigation and have water being settled around the root zone or adequate moisture being settled around the root zone for a much longer time compared to a raised bed. And even if you try to even construct raised bed, it may not even hold out as long as the crop because being a sand, is the soil particle is gradually sinking. So it won't hold out even for the remainder of the crop. So farmers in Yalas, Landui, and St. Thomas generally go for flat beds because of their soil type. So take that in mind, farmers in Manchester, Clarendon, or other areas. You have to work with a flatbed based on your soil type. All right. The next scenario below, we see in a farm in Portmore, which is a sandy loam soil type. Right. So you have basically quick drainage or reasonable amount of drainage. But the thing is that being a flat land, the area is basically prone to excess water being settled, right? So you're trying to create a raised bed to prevent that additional water from entering your onion beds, right? Or disturbing your onion beds. So based on this style type, you can work with a raised bed scenario. And as you see, the beds are nicely refined, basically, and to note, the beds are not too high. And the reason I'm saying this again, if you have your beds being high, what you do, you lose most of your water in the forest. So the water will basically sink, leaving that upper surface dry. So a farmer may irrigate for about 3 to 4 hours and come to realize that most of the water ends up in the furrow and start having sagging in the furrow. Right? When the bed is flatter, you have most of the water being spread across the bed and giving you better saturation. Right? And you won't have to irrigate that area for that amount of time. So probably about half an hour of wetting is sufficient when the bed is flatter, and basically nicely refined. So farmers, so there you have it. Two scenarios: same crop, same season, but different bed preparation. All right. And as I said before, I'm not leaving out the farmers who want to plant onion but are on a hilly terrain. Understand? So despite a lot of farmers or modern day farmers who are not interested in or who consider certain activity as basically tedious, there are still farmers who are basically forking the land. Right? So although it's not a plowing operation, forking still occurs in areas that have steep terrains. But what I'd encourage the farmers to do, if you want to plant onion, to do two forkings, two deep forkings, and you space them about 3 weeks apart, right? So your first forking basically bring up a lot of large clumps, while your second forking, which is done 3 weeks after, will help to refine those clumps and give you more loose soil. And followed by a forking, you can rake that area. So you use your garden rake or your farm rake to refine those clumps to get adequate preparation as with farmers on the flat. And generally you want to, as I said, run it along the hillside. So not sloping your beds towards the foot of the hill, but along the hill. So we're doing the operation in contours, and that will help to hold the land better and prevent excess slippage or runoff of water. So for farmers on the hillside, you can still cultivate the crop, but do it in contours and basically allow and try to do deep forking of your land. Right? Moving on. Ah, this this is, I think, is one of the most crucial operation in terms of land preparation. And since the recent rains, for farmers who had basically sowed their onion seeds prior to the rain, they have realized that drain construction is by far one of the most crucial operation in land preparation. Because many a times we see large farms basically come in with heavy equipment and construct drains even before they prepare the land. So drain construction can be done even before you're plowing, your harrowing, and your bed shaping, right? So this exercise is basically done to prevent any excess water from basically causing damage to your property or your investment, right? And usually what I advise farmers to do is to create uh, two head drains. You have a first head drain that would be deeper, that would take off most of the water. And if that excess water past that head drain, you'll have a second drain, which is smaller, that will basically keep or take off that water from the roads, right? So drain construction is very ideal. And what you can do in periods of heavy rainfall, try to visit your location and see what's the flow of the water. Or you don't have to visit it at that direct time. Generally, you will see water taking a course. So try to construct the drain along those courses to prevent any destruction to your property. And with this season being wet and unpredictable, I'd advise farmers, especially those on the flat, who tend not to want to construct drain, either due to tedious activity or the soil type. I'd advise them construct a drain to preserve the investment that you're making, right? So drain construction is very crucial. And I said before, farmers on the slope try to position your beds running across the slope. All right, so we have prepared our beds, right? And now we intend to basically plant. But before we plant, what we're observing is that after all those operations of plowing and harrowing, we see that weed seeds have escaped through those processes. So what we have is a stale bed technique that is popular in the onion planting industry, right? And what this basically is is that you are trying to minimize the weed seed bank in the soil. And by minimizing, you want to do this operation about 1 to 2 months prior to planting. And there's different scenarios, and let me go through them. So if you're considering using a post-emergent herbicide, like a glyphosate AG or a glyphosate max, what you want to do is basically allow the weed seeds to germinate. And you can do this by running out of irrigation and watering the bare land, right? allow your weed seeds to germinate. And then now, once they reach at the about 2 to 3 true leaf stage, you basically come in and apply your systemic herbicide. And this will cause control of the leaf, shoot, and root, right? So completely killing the plant, right? And then you continue again by constant irrigation again, to basically allow the next set of weed seeds to germinate. And once again, you'll come in with your glyphos max or your glyphos AG and control those weed species present. All right. And if if you realize that you're not getting complete control, you could combine the glyphos max with 2,4-D, which I mentioned before is a selective broadleaf spray. So you can combine the two of them to basically get complete control of your weed species. But seeing that 2,4-D has pre-emergent properties, and that I'm going to discuss that shortly, you have to do that field bed operation at least a month before, a month or two before planting, because the pre-emergent property of the 2,4-D will basically control any seeds that you're planting in the soil. So you do that before. All right. If, for example, you want to basically get pre-emergent control your grass, maybe a grass weed species, you can combine the glyphosate with a pre-emergent, a designed pre-emergent herbicide, like a benzene or your prole. And what those do is that once the seed is trying to sprout, pre-emergent herbicide being applied to the surface of the soil will prevent that shoot growth, right? They're basically killing the development of your weed species. And as I mentioned with the 2,4-D, being that benzene and prole are proven herbicides, they want to do them at least want the application at least a month before to allow 3 to 4 weeks before directly planting your onion seeds. Understand? And in application of pre-emergent herbicide, the key thing, two key things to note. Firstly, soil has to be moist. So ensure that the soil is moist before applying the product. And moisture is essential because it allows the product to go into the lower layers of the soil, and also the moisture helps in the germination of the weed seeds. So the seeds have to basically start germinate for the herbicide to act on the seed. Right? And the next thing is that secondly is basically apply your the pre-emergent herbicide in a manner that you won't interfere with the layer that you have sprayed the herbicide on. And what I mean is that when you spray on your benzene or your prole, do not walk over or through the area that you have treated. Because once you do that, you're breaking that film that will basically give you that control. Right? So do not walk over that area. And for getting better control, you can use your adjuvants like your new film P, the benzene or prole. That will allow the herbicide to stick greater to the soil particles. All right, and let's see here the pre-emergent herbicides, the prole and the benzene, both active pendimethalin and application rate 20 to 40 ml per gallon. Right, and both of them you can get at AgChem. And to note, the difference in action or the different properties is that the benzene basically is not coated. So what may happen is that when you apply or use a knapsack to apply, it will stain your sprayer. Understand? But for the prole, because of coated formulation, you won't get that staining as with the benzene. But both are very effective in controlling your weed seeds. All right, so basically wrapping up now. I know it was a long presentation, but I hope that you find the information very useful. And what we have basically done is to design weekly programs that we are making available at the office, and you can even contact the different reps. So in the Northwest region, you're looking at Mr. Dale Smith. In the Southwest region, you're looking at Mr. Cian Spence. In the Central region, South Central region, you're looking at Dean Parker. And yours truly in the Southeast region, and Mr. Lecky in the Northeast region. And at this time, if you have any questions, you can basically ask them either by commenting in the suggestion box or just raise a hand. Any questions? Stephanie?
Janoy, go ahead and ask your question for the prize.
Okay. Sorry, viewers. All right. Basically, is me to ask you a question. All right. So, for you to win, basically, a bottle of Prol, a liter bottle of Prol. All right. I want you to answer this question. What are two parameters or two considerations in site selection? So give me two parameters you need to consider in site selection.
Yes. Rick here.
Yes, sir, Rick. How are you doing?
Not bad, you know. Terrain
Yeah.
and water source.
All right. Good. So farmers here at terrain and water source. So water availability and quality. And Rick, I know you're a big onion farmer. So you're lining up for the onion season, right?
Well, I want to do that, but the rivers, you know, in Landoway,
Yes.
posting a plan to go across.
Yeah, so we're just waiting out this season to basically kickstart our production. And Lando is a very productive onion area, and I'm basically pushing them this year to increase their production, right? So there's a big competition now with Manchester and Clarendon, St. Thomas. We're getting the whole island into this push to grow onions. All right, and thanks, Rick, and we'll contact you on how see online and Stephanie. Yes, Roger.
Before you go, there's a question in the chat. When is the best time to sow onions?
All right, the best time and most ideal time will be in the fall. And what we're talking about the fall season is that starting from about October to about late December is the most ideal time. But you have different seasons for onion. You have the fall season and the spring. So with the fall season may range from September all the way to February, right? In terms, and when I'm talking about fall, I'm talking about the lighting. So from September to February, you have a shorter day length. But as it touch March onwards, the day length increase, and which we usually call it our spring season. But the most ideal time to plant onions is from between October to about midway or late December. Those are the most ideal time, especially when we have periods of heavy rain in September. Right? I hope that answers the question.
And there's another question in the chat from Carol Meredith. What kind of bed and sloping, sandy loam, and what is the best time to sow? Also, is there a particular variety?
All right, for sandy loam soils, the best bed type is a raised bed type because a lot of times those soils still have elements of clay. So if you use a flat bed, you basically get greater compaction. So the soil particles after wetting would compact together, and that will reduce the amount of nutrient uptake and water uptake. So on a sandy loam, the raised bed would be the best option. All right, and the timing for planting on that soil would be from about late October to about December. That's the best time. You can try a spring crop, but if you're new to the cultivation of onion, I'd say late October to December. And varieties to consider around the fall period would be like your Texas early gunner varieties. You have other varieties out there that are being introduced, but the Texas early gunner variety is one of the most common one, and you have other hybrids from different suppliers, which you can check. So you're asking them for a fall variety if you want to consider growing from October to, or you want to plant from October to December.
Galaxy A30 had your hand up. And
Okay.
Tracy, Galaxy A30.
You had a question?
Not seeing it. Tracy is saying, do you sow directly to the soil?
All right. Yes, you can sow directly to the soil. Usually we recommend that you basically treat your seeds with an insecticide. The one that we have on the market is called Cabaril. So you can mix your seeds with the Cabaril and sow it directly into the soil. And usually what I recommend is that if farmers can basically pre-treat their soil with an insecticide like diazinon or Caratrax to prevent any insect pests like ants from taking away the seeds, I'd advise you to do that. But you can sow directly in the soil, or you can basically plant by transplant. So you're growing onion seedlings and then you plant them out individually. Which the transplanting option is very tedious to the operation. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Ms. Dixon, go
Georgia.
ahead.
Yes. So if I'm new to planting onions, which procedure you prefer for me? Straight to the soil or transplanting?
I'd say straight to the soil because
Straight to
transplanting is tedious in terms of the time and labor. So we don't have sufficient labor and time. I'd say direct seed because direct seed onions are basically a very, I'd say, as a fighter crop. So even if the onions grow on top of each other, you still have roots being penetrated in the soil. So if your planting density is a little bit more than what is recommended, you still have those onions growing adequately. So direct seeding would be the better option for the first time farmers. And for the upcoming training, that will be next week.
Okay, thank
you. Okay, you're welcome. For the training that's going to be held next week, Tuesday at 1 p.m. I'd focus on different planting options, right? And show you how the crops still perform even with a higher planting density. Any more questions, Georgia?
Stephanie, go ahead.
All right, thank you for joining us. Thanks everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next virtual session. And this will be next Tuesday, the 24th of November. Same time, same place. And as listed here, we will cover onion pest diseases and control along with nutrition. Thanks again for joining us and have a great rest of the week.
Just a minute here.
Yes, sir.
Guy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what I'm asking is the challenges that we're facing over by Abby. I was wondering if being at the tractor is going to be a problem to come over. If it will, what our intention is to rake the bed and plant back on the same soil. That is the thing. I think about that.
All right, with your soil being a sandy soil, it can happen. But what I'll suggest is that if you have access to the hand tractor, that can basically till that first 6 inches of soil. I'll tell you to use a hand tiller to till that first 6 inches, and then you rake the beds.
You're talking about the rotavator?
Yeah, the rotavator or the hand tiller. The hand tiller. Small tractors with a tiller at the back. That would be a better option because the rake won't give you that 6 inches a day. If you can use an hand tiller,
Okay.
you basically get a better preparation.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So farmers, thanks again. I hope the information was useful. A little longer than scheduled, but with onion production, we have to be tedious. We have to basically dot all the I's, cross all the T's. So with the next session, I'm hoping to basically provide as much information and to cover all scenarios. As I said, we want to reach that goal of about 45,000 pounds per acre. All right, and we know we can do it, so let's do it.